So tell me more about the 50s.
Well, one of the great things in the 50s, I graduated. Wasn't the top of the class, but I wasn't in the bottom of the class either. And I graduated with what they call a commercial degree, which meant it was bookkeeping, shorthand, typing, that type of degree they called it. So that was fun. And from there, I got my first big girl job at a nursing home, believe it or not, at a little place called McHenry. I don't know if it's still there or not, but anyway, my stepmom, and my mom and my stepdad took me up there and left me, and it was in the middle of nowhere, and I think the closest place was a little place called Thurman, and because I used to catch the train from there to Montgomery, and that was a fun thing because I wasn't used to riding a train, so that was a big deal with me to be a big girl, get on the train and go to Montgomery, and of course my stepdad Tampa, he would be there to pick me up, so it was merely coming home. You know? So that was a fun time in the 50s.
Like you would work during the week and come home on the weekend?
No, not every weekend, because I didn't have every weekend off. About maybe once a month, something like that. And from there, I went to Cleveland, and I got a job working in private duty, taking care of a little 4-year-old boy, and that was nice. Jewish family. He owned a sweater company, so that was really nice, and I learned a lot about the Jewish holidays and food and stuff like that, and a lot of food I didn't think the Jews ate, but they would eat it, but they wouldn't eat it during the holiday time, like pork or stuff like that. They would not eat it during the holiday. But I could eat whatever I wanted, whenever I wanted. They had certain things they really didn't eat. I think it was pork was one thing they really did not eat. But she would buy bacon, pork chops for me, and all that kind of stuff, and I would cook it and eat. And it was funny thing about that. Certain times a year, we had certain pans that we used, and you with certain things you had to do with the pans. I don't know what all they did, purify them. I guess they did, but that's the only time we used those pans, like Hanukkah or what was it, Rosh Hashanah?
Rosh Hashanah.
Yeah, those holidays we used these special pans, and I remember one of the holidays. It was real fun. The single women, certain things, certain foods the single women couldn't have. And I remember my boss was teasing his sister. He said, well, one of these days when you get a husband, you can have some of this. So I don't remember what the food was, but I know she wasn't allowed to have any of it. So they had special things, and the food was really, really, really good. I learned how to cook a couple of things. I can't tell you what the name of them was, but I did know how to cook a couple of things. But I didn't do the kosher stuff. I didn't cook that. They did the pans and all that kind of stuff. But I would just watching them drinking that wine and getting high, cutting up and carrying on. It was real fun for me. Yeah.
Tell us more about the 50s.
Um, Let me see what else. 50 was such a wonderful growing. I guess it was my growing up time, because by that time I had become 18, going into my 20s, and 1954 I got married to my childhood boyfriend, which way back in the early, well, I guess it was the late 40s where I met Ray West. And I was 13, he was 14, and he said he was going to marry me. So that was way back there, and I was like, yeah, right. This poor raggedy boy talk about marrying me, And of course, he told my aunt that. And I remember when I met him, that was a good time. I remember when I met him at a movie theater in Oak Hill. And I remember the picture that was playing, Back to Patan. And when we were coming into the theater, Ray was coming out because I didn't know who he was because I hadn't met him. But Helen and everybody else knew who he was, but I didn't. But anyway, he turned around and came back in. At that time, you could watch a movie over and over and over, you know. So I don't know how he had come out, so I don't know how he got back in there, but nevertheless, he did. And sat right behind me. And if you've ever seen Back to Patan, you know, there's some sad scenes in there. So I remember I was crying, and he told me to shut up. And I don't think he should have told me that because I turned around. Remember, we in the theater. I turned around and blessed his soul out. To make bad matters worse, when the movie was over, he had the nerve to ride home with me and my auntie. And I'm like, where you going? And he got right on in the car, right in the back seat with me. And he picked me all the way to Red Star. And stayed there for dinner. I said to myself, is this dude gonna sleep here tonight? I told my auntie, when Aunt Peggy, when is he going home? She said, Ray is over here all the time. She said, he's a nice kid. He really is a nice boy. I said to myself, I'll take your word for it. 'Cause I couldn't stand him, you know, because he's messing with me, you know. But sure enough, we learned to get along this summer. And I remember his girlfriend threw rocks. She was passing by the house, and we would be sitting in the yard under the tree, and she would throw rocks over in the yard at us. And I said, what is wrong with this girl? And he said, oh, don't pay her no attention. But Bing had gave me a head up. Bing was my buddy. Bing had told me that was Ray's girlfriend till you came on the scene. And said, she mad with you because she jealous. I said, well, she better try to hit Ray. She don't better be trying to hit me. So Bing said, I'll tell her she better leave you alone. I said, oh, you tell Ray to tell her that she better leave me alone. You know, I was kind of feisty back in those days. And anyway, that was one of the exciting things. But anyway, she lost out. I wind up marrying him. And then here comes Ray Jr. That was my joy. And I guess really when you think about it, I guess that was really my joy for the 1950s, because that was my first baby. And people used to say, well, Mildred, what you gonna have? And at that time, you didn't know what you were gonna have until you got here. And I said, I'm gonna have a boy. That's how you know you're gonna have a boy. It could be a girl. I said, it's gonna be a boy. And his name gonna be Ralph Elliott West. And sure enough, here he come, a little old big head boy about this big, 4 pounds, so little he couldn't even come out the hospital when I came. But because I was nursing a couple of days later, Dr. Moran gave the order to let me bring my baby home because I was nursing him. He said her breast milk was the best thing for him. So he started gaining weight, but he was so tiny you could almost fit in your hand because he was only 4 pounds. So, but he survived and got to be a strong man, strength-wise and head-wise too. He had a mind of his own. So I guess that was really getting married and then having Ray Jr. That was one of the highlights in the 50s. Yeah.
Tell us about this set of pictures.
Oh, this was my wedding.
Yeah.
This was my wedding. Yes, that was me and Ray. And this was a lady named Miss Fields. And she was like I guess you would call like one of the mothers of the church. Because whatever went on in church, she knew about it. And she was also a good friend of my stepmother, which later became my stepmother, Catherine. And this was my girlfriend, Joanne. And of course, that's my sister Helen. And let's see, that's my dad. And Webster, which was my uncle by marriage, because that was Josephine's brother. So, and then here we are, doing the vows and all this kind of stuff. That's Dad. That's a good picture of Dad. I don't see my mom on here. Of course, that's a pretty picture of Helen. I didn't know she was that pretty. Yeah.
And he's wearing a Marine uniform.
Yeah, he's in his dress blues. And of course, that was a highlight of the neighborhood to see this Marine in this dress blue. They thought I had struck gold. Mildred that married her a military man, a Marine, So that was a big deal for the neighborhood. Yeah, and that was my pastor that married me, W.P. Strickland. I never will forget his name. He was such a sweet old man. Yeah.
Well, many of us hear about the 50s and the civil rights movement. That's sort of the associations we have from television. Television had just kind of been invented in the late
Right.
40s and the 50s.
Yeah.
So a lot of the images that we have are from those days and shows like Happy Days and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
What was it like for you in the 50s as you were coming into not only adulthood, but recognizing that the world was different than the neighborhoods and the hillsides that you were growing up on?
Well, I guess it might have been sort of what you would call today a culture shock, because back then that's when it was really started talking about segregation, and of course we were segregated, but you didn't think about it, because I went to my school. And my girlfriend, which was white, she went to her school. We all met down at the company store to catch the bus. Black folks and white folks been courting since the beginning of time. They had girlfriends and boyfriends, black and white, right then, and that was in the early 50s. And so we didn't really pay that much attention, because when we had football games and all of that, Woodrow Wilson, which was the white high school, they would come to cheer for Stratton, which was the black high school. And we would go there to cheer for Woodrow Wilson against whatever school there was. So we was still a neighborhood, But then, so like I said, we know we was segregated, but it wasn't like it is now, where it was so much hatred, I guess, because we were such a close neighborhood. Everybody's daddy worked in the coal mine. Everybody's daddy made the same amount of money, unless you had a different kind of position in the mine. Everybody shopped at the company store. Everybody had the same doctor. So we all had the same thing, But then this movement started about Black Panthers. Well, first time I heard a Black Panther, I thought it was a Black Panther, the animal. And then come to find out that this was a organization of militant people that was fighting against segregation. They was fighting for their rights, because they felt like, black people were being mistreated, and they were standing up for it. So it was a big deal. Nobody wanted to tangle with the Black Panthers. And I remember hearing something on the radio about Watts. No, I think we may have had a television by then, little pink poster-sized TV. You got to get right up on it and look at it. But they burnt down Watts in Los Angeles. I mean, they really destroyed that place. And a lot of people got hurt. A lot of storefronts a lot of stores lost their business. But one of the things I never could understand, and even today, why you tear up your own stuff? These were black people tearing up black businesses. So I don't know if it was black business being run for white people or what. So I never quite understood, why would you do that? Why would I burn down my own house? I understood standing up for your rights. You know, I've always had a mouth on me, and I always stood up for what I thought was right, whether you agree with it or not. I always had a mind of my own. I never believed everything nobody told me, not even my pastor. But so I understood that, but I never could understand in your neighborhood that you're destroying stuff in your neighborhood, that you got to go back somewhere else to try to buy some groceries or some food or some clothes. And today I still don't quite understand what the theory was behind it, unless those stores was actually owned by white people. So if that was the case, I could understand that they was doing that to hurt the white man, you know. But in the meantime, it was hurting us too. And then when it went on into the civil rights thing, Martin Luther King and all of that, I really understood the march on that, because they weren't really destroying stuff, but they were standing up for what they believed. If it meant being beaten, if it meant being going to jail, if it meant being lynched, this was their rights, and they stood up. So I understood that, and I was all for that. But I just didn't understand that Watts part of burning up and tearing up your own neighborhood, you know, because Watts was pretty much all black, you know.
So the 60s. What word comes to mind when you think of the 60s? And feel free to check your notes.
Let me see. I think I may have wrote something down for the 60s. Oh, I think I wrote down 59, 60. Chris was born at the hospital. Let me go back to 1959. I remember by that time I had 4 children, 3 children, Ray Jr., Ted, and Carl. When Carl came along, I knew he was a girl. I didn't have any boy names anywhere. They asked me what was I going to name, and I said, I don't know. Because I only had girl names in my mind. All I thought was pink and light blue and pretty pastel colors. And here come this big-head boy, just as pretty as he could be. But he wasn't a girl. And so I spent a lot of time praying for my daughter. I wanted that daughter. But believe it or not, Carl was the one that was close to me. He never would get but 10 feet from me, worried me to death. Mama, mommy, hey mama. And I'd be saying, Carl Anthony, what do you want? Hi. You know, that little round face peeping through the screen door. We had to always know, you know, where I was. Even unto this day, Carl not gonna be too far from me. He gonna know where I am, what's going on with me. He gonna call, you know, he gonna be there if nobody else is there. If I gotta go somewhere where I don't care, to the ends of the earth, Carl gonna be the one to see to it that I get there. But 59 was when I prayed for Vicky, and I got her. Mouth almighty and tongue everlasting, but I love her to death. But she's the child that I pray for. Then comes 1960. Here comes Chris. Warm, fuzzy, cuddly. Where Vicky was independent, you know, I love up on you a little while, but leave me alone. But not Chris. She would just lay there just like a rock. As long as you want to stroke me, I'm willing to lay there and absorb it all up. That's Chris. She's always been fun, loving. But believe it or not, I think Chris might be a mama baby, although she was a daddy baby. But I think in her later years, she became a mama baby because she always looking out for me, wants to know what's going on with me. And sometimes I think she thinks she's my mama too. But I have to let her know that I'm still the mama. But I wouldn't take that. I wouldn't take nothing for her. Then came 1961. I came up pregnant again. And they said, what you gonna have? I don't know and I don't care. As long as it comes. Russell Wade. I thought that was the most beautiful name. I said, this baby, I don't care whether he potty trained when he's 6 years old. He's still wearing a diaper. That's all right with me. I don't care if he's walking around going to school with carrying a bottle. It's all right with me. But guess what? He potty trained himself. He kicked that bottle to the curb, and before he was 9 months old, he was walking. It's like he was getting out of the way. But no more came. I said, God must have knew that he was going to be the last one. But I'm telling you, Russell has been a joy. He has been my star. He has been so humble and so steadfast with a head on his shoulder, knowing where he's going and striving for that. So each one of my kids have their own skills. Like Carl is my mechanic. He can tear stuff down ever since he was a kid. Tear stuff down, put it back together. And I said, Carl, when you were little, you tore things apart. You put them back together. I said, then when you got gone, God called you to be a minister. So you were picking and helping up, putting souls back together. You was putting lives back together. I said, Vicky is one who likes stuff organized and clean. I said, she'll clean the dust off of your eyeballs if you keep your eyes open long enough. I said, so she's like that. I said, Ted, steadfast, like his daddy, slow moving, don't talk much. But he's there, no foolishness. Yeah, he's right there. And the older he gets, the more he looks like his daddy. Good cook, he can clean. That's it. And that's all of them. Ray Jr., which was the oldest one. I mean, he had a mind of his own. He was a leader. He knew he was musically inclined. He knew where he wanted to go, and he would set his mind to whatever it was he was going to accomplish. And you wasn't going to get in the way if it meant getting a whipping. I mean, getting a beating, because that's what you got during those days. You didn't get spankings and whippings. You got a beating. And if he had to take a beating in order to do what he wanted to do, he was willing to do that. But he's going to do what he said he was going to do, including running away from home. And let me tell you a little anecdote. Ray Jr., a black boy, a Puerto Rican, and a white boy ran away from home on the base here in Cherry Point. And I don't know how Ray got the word, but he came home so upset. Said Ray Jr., they found Ray Jr. and these other two kids down there in Georgia with a guitar on their back. They going to California to make their name. Then they get halfway, decide they don't want to go to California, and turn around and go into Nashville. So I don't know who picked them up to get them as far as they got. But they wind up almost back in fact, I think they did get to Nashville anyway. They got wherever they got. And the three daddies, these military men, had to go and get these boys. Ray Jr., the only little black one, in the cell by himself. The Puerto Rican and the white boy, I don't know if they was in the cell together, but they wasn't with Ray Jr. Ray was so mad with Ray Jr., he wanted to string him up, but he was so glad nothing had happened to him. Nothing happened to him. So you think about, what could have happened to them three kids out there? I don't even remember how old they were. I guess they were young teenagers. But they were going to make their name in California. And who knows, if they hadn't changed their mind, they may would have made it to California. So that's my 6 children for you. They have bouquet all of their own. I wouldn't take nothing for them. Oh, so I kind of got off the track. Where were we?
We're in 1960. Well, that's what was happening at the beginning of 1960.
Yeah,
you were having babies.
That 1960 was the love child and the psychedelic drugs and all of that kind of stuff. So I only read about that. I didn't understand what they were doing, but I would see people looking like gypsies to me with flowers in their hair and all raggedy looking, the sandals on with no shoes, barefooted sometime with uh, flowers going around their ankles and all that. But they loved everybody. They loved everybody, and I guess it was because they was drunk off of whatever that was they was smoking. So those were the days. The young people during those days, they were happy days. They were happy because they were doing them drugs and whatnot, drinking and carrying on, but they were really enjoying their life. Didn't know what it was doing to them, but they enjoyed it. And you look at some of the adults now that were back during that time, they still got that love child type syndrome. Because I had some neighbors that lived next door. They still look like our children. You know, happy, love everybody, you know. So I guess it was a fun time for the teenagers and young people that was growing up during that time. But the world was really, really changing from segregation. Black people was coming into their own. They were beginning to stand up for, I'm not taking it anymore. You know, we've been held down long enough. We got schools with raggedy school books and all this kind of stuff. It's separate but equal, but it was not equal, you know, because although I never remember having leftover books, but I know some schools did had raggedy books and all of that kind of stuff. The teachers didn't get the supplies that they wanted or that they needed, you know. And I guess further, because we were kind of in town, where we were in town, but further in the rural areas, I understand that it was pretty tough, you know, for black kids and let's not forget, poor whites. They weren't much better than the blacks because the society didn't care nothing about the poor white, like people lived in Appalachian and up there in the Whitaker Mountains. They were poor as church mice. And the city council and high society didn't care no more about them than they did about me and my little black boys and girls. So I think people a lot of time they forget that